Hello and welcome. I'm David Fechner, partner at BDO South Australia, your host for today's event. Thank you for taking the time out of today as we rethink the direction for business in South Australia. We'd like to acknowledge that we're here on the land of the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, that we respect their spiritual relationship with the land and the country. We acknowledge the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, and their cultural and heritage beliefs are as important today as they have been in the past. This is the 7th year that we've conducted the BDO SA State Business Survey. And of course, 2020 has been a bit of a different year. Understanding the day-to-day experiences for South Australian business continues to be our focus. And it feels particularly important at the moment with the uncertainty that is going on. A little bit of housekeeping. So during the session today, we will be conducting a live polling questions. These are entirely confidential, so please be candid and provide your input. Any questions otherwise that you have can be entered into the chat box throughout the session. We'll either endeavour to engage with those through the session or at the end. If you're having technical difficulties, there'll be a URL displayed during the session. Please click on the URL and hopefully that can help you out. My great pleasure now to introduce our wonderful panel who've generously agreed to give up their time and provide us with some significant insight around the environment in South Australia. John Chapman. John's the South Australian Small Business Commissioner, appointed in 2014 and appointed for a further 4 years in 2017. John plays a very important role in the South Australian economy. That role including alternative dispute resolution for business disputes, information for small business, and advocacy on their behalf. John has extensive experience as a senior executive in public, private, and not-for-profit roles, and is an experienced board director. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon, David.
We have Louise Miller-Frost. Louise is CEO of St. Vincent de Paul. Louise commenced her role on the 10th of March 2020, so it's been an interesting ride for Louise. She has a very diverse career covering roles in state and local government, as well as in the profit and not-for-profit sector. She's always focused on making a difference in our community and addressing inequality, something she is passionate about. Louise brings us board experience in health, community services, environment, risk management, economic development and education services. Welcome to Louise. And we have Kate Berry. Kate is the Chief People Officer, Discovery Holiday Parks. Kate is known for her human resource expertise, her knowledge of leadership capability, strategic planning, consulting skills, and her commercial acumen. Prior to joining Discovery Parks, Kate worked in a senior HR leadership role with the AFL. She's undertaken roles in professional services, retail and hospitality sectors in various locations around Australia. Hello, Kate.
Hello, David.
Excellent. All right, so this is our wonderful panel. And without any further ado, let's get started. So it's been a pretty challenging year. We've come into this change now rolling into October and the changes around JobKeeper. So for businesses and industry, a lot has been going on. So I think to understand your feelings around the current business environment in South Australia and what your networks are telling you. So Kate, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, David. Well, I'm pleased to say that the sentiment around my networks, and particularly within the tourism and hospitality industry, particularly in regional tourism, the sentiment is very strong. So we're seeing very strong bookings, forward bookings and confidence. We had thought that at the end of JobKeeper, we may have seen changes in consumer behaviour. However, we are seeing a really great pipeline of business, and our suppliers seem to have the same sentiment. Along with my own professional networks, I'm pleasantly surprised here in South Australia that there seems to be a reasonable outlook economically. So may that continue, and certainly the confidence seems to be there.
Absolutely, that business confidence, highly and critical both for investment and for employment. John,
right.
if we throw to you, what are you seeing, and what feedback are you getting out of your network?
In terms of our business, we are dealing with quite a significant number of disputes around retail and commercial leases, and we encourage anyone who's having problems with their landlords or landlords having problems with their tenants, go to our website and indeed lodge a dispute. I'm seeing generally positive developments in terms of the economy. We're not quite back to normal, particularly in the CBD. Not all of the government workers, for example, are back in place, and indeed some of the big corporates, and that has an impact on businesses. I certainly agree with the regional outlook that Kate talked about. I've been out and about in the north of the state and Kangaroo Island recently, and there's a very positive view in terms of bookings and the path forward. If people can't travel overseas, they're looking to travel locally, and there's some great things to see in South Australia. Obviously, there are sectors that continue to struggle, and while the accommodation hospitality is having its own journey, you've got big hotels still closed in Adelaide, but you've got some being used as quarantine hotels. If you're a travel agent, you're in great difficulty, and that is somewhat problematic. Hotels still, very slow in some of their businesses. Talking to a business this morning in the construction area, and they're really very, very worried about their forward pipeline because they provide some fit out, and they're struggling at the moment in terms of their forward orders, and they're wondering what's going to happen at the end of JobKeeper Mark II next year. So, it's mixed, but overall I'm seeing positive.
Excellent. And Louise, obviously a very geographically diversified business with St Vincent de Paul, and also with a large range of clientele. So what are you seeing, and what feedback are you hearing?
Yes, thanks, David. Look, we see a lot of people who are in crisis. So we see the people who aren't getting back to work, unfortunately. It has actually been across the sector relatively quiet in the last couple of months, or the last few months, and partly that's because of the COVID supplement to JobSeeker. What we're finding now with that dropping down, and also the end of JobKeeper Part 1, is that we are starting to see people who previously haven't ever needed charity help before, haven't needed to come to us before. That's risen even in the last week, and that is what we expect to rise over the rest of the year, and certainly into next year. And these are people who, unlike those who've been on JobSeeker for some period of time, these are people who are experiencing for the first time, and they haven't, they might still have financial commitments, they might still have kids at schools that are expensive, they might have mortgages. There's a whole load of things that they are trying to maintain in their new lifestyle and find jobs at the same time. So we're it's been relatively quiet, but it's starting to get busier already, which is not a good sign for us.
No, it's not. And has there been much difference geographically? So if we talk about metropolitan versus what you're seeing regionally, Louise?
Not that I've really noticed. It does seem to be relatively evenly spread across the whole of the state.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, guys. Well, despite the gloominess of the discussion, in relative terms, South Australia has done really, really well. If we look at our poor colleagues sitting in Victoria, having a very tough time of it, and there's been a lot of impact. What I was hoping to do now is jump into one of our polls. So curious to understand from our audience how many of them have been in need of government assistance and relied upon COVID. So you'll see hopefully up on your screen If you could just take a moment to have a look at the questions, and then we'll have a look at the results and have a chat through. So this is, has your business applied for or received any of the following relief measures? So this is since March. So if we could just get some input from those. Okay, we have results rolling in. Thank you. All right, we'll close the poll off there. So if we have a chat through the results here, probably no surprises. John, any particularly there that you'd like to have a quick chat on?
Yeah, I think it shows the importance of the JobKeeper program and its importance, I suppose, in spreading support right across the business sector. And having been involved in ongoing discussions with the Australian Tax Office at some very senior levels when they were developing it and putting it in place, it's a pretty amazing result in terms of what the federal government managed to do. And I think that's kept a lot of businesses and people in particular, their employees, in work, which has been significant to the overall economy. So I'm surprised probably at the higher level in terms of the businesses that have actually applied for it. But it does show the extent, I suppose, of the impacts on the businesses during the COVID period and the shutdown that we had earlier this year.
And Louise, that JobKeeper support looks consistent with what you were saying?
Yes, very much. And I'd have to say across the not-for-profit sector, it's been absolutely vital as our income dried up through fundraising and the op shops and that sort of thing. So I know that not only for Vinnie's but across the sector, that's been very, very welcome. And just the way that it was rolled out so quickly and the way that it supported people to remain in employment and supported that employment relationship, I think in terms of a policy response has been fantastic.
Excellent. And Kate, I know that there's some points that you were hoping to make around JobKeeper as well.
Yes, certainly. I would agree with what Louise has said. We have about 1,400 people. The good majority was stood down during COVID for quite some time. The extent of we had our operations managers on the ground on half pay for 6 months. So by having the JobKeeper in place, we are really pleased with the retention that we've achieved. Where we could actually also bring people back to work whilst our businesses were shut to do maintenance and all sorts of tasks that they perhaps would not normally be doing, because there was flexibility also offered under the awards, so some industrial relations flexibility that allowed us to do things that perhaps we couldn't have done previously. So certainly we benefited, and we've managed to stay afloat in our rebuild as a result of JobKeeper. Yeah, and I agree with the that was implemented was essential. Very good.
We've been through a big change now in terms of the moving into JobKeeper 2 and the substantial reductions in that support. So again, I'd like to throw up another quick poll to understand from our participants which businesses are currently still participating in any of these remote. So up on your screen now, is your business currently participating in or receiving any of the following? If you could have a quick click through those for me, that would be wonderful. And I think it'll be interesting for us to understand what changes have been occurring currently versus the 6 months that we have just been through. I'll just give you a little bit of time to go through that. The results are rolling in. Thank you. All right, guys, what have we got? So there you go. In fact, I'm surprised at those results that JobKeeper support's still at 44%. 44%. That's quite surprising. The other arrangements that are there. Louise, your reflection on those results?
Yeah, look, I'm quite surprised that JobKeeper Part 2's so well taken up as well, actually. Certainly for us and for a number of others in my sector, we are not eligible for JobKeeper Part 2, which, you know, on the one hand is a little disappointing, but on the other hand is a good problem to have, because it means that our finances have come back a bit. What we've found is that as a community, particularly when we're in dire straits, our community in Australia really pulls together, and fundraising's come back really well, which has been a great opportunity for us to continue to support those who are not doing so well in the community.
And John, your reflection on these results?
I think the JobKeeper support, yes, it does seem a bit high, but I think it shows the difficulties businesses are experiencing. In terms of the SA government small business grant, that closed very firmly on the 1st of June. So I'm not surprised we've got a zero response there. The Treasurer was very clear that it was an end date, and it ended. So yeah, I think we are still on a path. There's still no guarantees going forward, and it makes it very difficult for businesses to plan as to what might happen. All you can do is drive forward and hope that you're not going to be deviated off the path as we have been this year. But there's still a lot of uncertainty.
And Kate, were those results surprising to you?
They were higher than I thought. Certainly indicates recovery is still caring. Our organisation doesn't meet the criteria now, so we aren't supported for JobKeeper or job support. But we are turning our mind now to JobMaker to see if there's opportunities as we increase our business and obviously employ more people. So hopefully we'll get some, you know, some benefits from that new scheme.
Okay. Are those results surprising when we think about that sentiment that we discussed? So you know, your reflections on that business sentiment for the coming 6 months and what we've just seen there. So Louise, if I throw to you.
Look, I think what they reflect, particularly in South Australia, is how lucky we've been. You know, we've really dodged a bullet. Our government has managed this pandemic exceptionally well, but there has been an element of luck in it as well. And as a result of managing the pandemic early and quickly and successfully, it has meant that we've been able to open up and we've been able to restart the economy and have businesses reopen. And I think that's very much what it reflects. We're all terrified of the possibility of a second wave, and certainly having seen what's happened in Victoria, and my thoughts are really with our Victorian friends. As a result of sacrifices that they're making, we're all a lot safer today, and our economy is doing better because they've kept us safe. But who knows if it will come here? So wash your hands, people.
No, absolutely. Everybody stay safe. And Kate, again, any further comments in respect of the sentiment that you're seeing when we look at those results?
No, it's a very interesting indication for consumer confidence as well. Like, what will happen when organisations, if they don't fully recover and are still in that position where they need the JobKeeper next phase support and won't be able to access it. So that's very forefront of mind when it comes to our forecasting and business planning, the discretionary income that may or may not be available and job losses.
Yes. I also thought there was an interesting note in there for the federal government that should be aware of. Certainly we've seen in our practice as well, which was the SME loan support from the Commonwealth Government. So our evidence within our practice has been that we might have seen 2 of those that were done, and of our participants there, we saw 0% that accessed, that was the $250,000 government guarantee support. Does that sound consistent, John, from what you've heard back from taxpayers in terms of that bank support and the effectiveness of that Commonwealth grant? Or I should say Commonwealth guarantee?
The feedback that we got very early was that the process wasn't very effective, and the big banks really hadn't engaged with it for whatever reason. So those numbers really don't surprise me based on the feedback that we had. So that one, probably when you compare it to JobKeeper, doesn't get the big tick.
Yes, correct. And look, and I think as well as that, the Commonwealth Government's made it very difficult for the banks. We had a discussion there about the Commonwealth Government looking to the banks to be more lenient in terms of their business lending processes. But of course, the banks have just been dragged through the Royal Commissions, received significant fines. I'm sure none of us would like to have $1 billion fine. So to be dragged through that process and then for the federal government to stand there and go, but banks should be lending more. I think that makes it very difficult. I guess a flow on from that, John, that you alluded to earlier has been the work that you've had to be doing within landlord and tenants. Are there some more insights that you can provide us there in terms of what you're seeing in that relationship?
I think just picking up your point on the banks, as you pointed out, we've just been through a Royal Commission saying, you know, you've done all these dreadful things, and now we've got the federal government saying, oh no, we'll take all the brakes off. If you're running a bank, and you know, you have to say this is somewhat problematic. It makes it very difficult. These are big organisations to implement lending policies that are appropriate when you're getting such a divergence of views. So that's bad in the context of uncertainty. And when you've got banks uncertain about the future, what the natural reaction, human nature, is we pull back. And this is a time when businesses potentially are going to need a lot of help. I think significantly, getting back to the question, we've seen a lot of quite distressed landlords. I've seen the best behaviours and the absolute worst behaviours of both tenants and landlords. Particularly some of the larger national retail companies just decided they weren't going to pay rent back in April. We're not paying rent. A number of them were trading and trading quite well. I just think that's appalling corporate behaviour. We obviously have dealt with some through mediation, and some of them get a big tick because of the way they have engaged. The mum and dad landlords, some are mortgaged up quite substantially. Suddenly they've got no income. There was an example yesterday in the Fin Review of Quest in Central in King William Street, basically walking away from their agreements with their landlords, who happen to be, in many cases, mum and dads who've bought a room, which they get a guaranteed return on, supposedly guaranteed for a period. And now we're seeing the actual hotel manager just walking away from it all. I really question that sort of behaviour as well. You know, with the ones we've been dealing with, it's about a partnership. The lease is the lease. We've got some temporary legal measures in place where you can't be evicted, but you really need to be talking to each other and working together because both parties have a problem. Landlords are being expected to waive some rent, but on their side, the banks aren't waiving any interest. They've deferred it, but they're not waiving it. So it's a very difficult time for many people, and we're just trying to help people work their way through it.
Kate, when we talked about tourism and hospitality, and probably for retail as well, we've certainly noticed that the CBD in the centre of the city is still fairly quiet. So again, through your networks, what sort of things are you seeing in that regard?
Well, my CEO is on the South Australian Tourism Commission, so he keeps us up to date with, you know, trends in tourism in South Australia, and it's evident that, as I said before, the regional tourism and regional accommodation and, you know, hospitality providers and tour operators are doing far better than the city, and the city is now focused as to how we can ensure that businesses and accommodation providers, conferencing, etc., can occur in the CBD. So that is a real worry. And of course, we've seen the reduction in the, you know, Adelaide Oval usage, a reason why people come to the city. So that is certainly, I think, a hot topic for the state and for the tourism industry as to how we can ensure that these, you know, you certainly are seeing incredible deals for people locally to stay in hotels in the city, because they're obviously not, we don't have people coming to the city for business, conferencing, and for pleasure.
Yes. And Louise, what have you seen around in those trends in relation to what's been happening in the centre of the city relative to what's rolling out?
Look, I actually did Fred's Van in the city last night, which is where we feed people who are sleeping and homeless on the streets. And I have to say, we had over 60 people there, and that was quite confronting. And people are, you know, there's some people that we would recognise from previous times, but there's a lot of new people there, older women, certainly OC students who are doing it tough. Different people, different groups. So we are seeing more people ending up on the streets already, and we do expect that particularly those people who are employed in the gig economy and part-time roles, they seem to be the ones that are really struggling to get financial feet back again. So we are expecting to see more of that, unfortunately.
So we'll move on now to chat about rethinking South Australia and whether the COVID pandemic has provided us with any changes and any opportunities. And one I wanted to fire off with is a poll. Nobody likes to talk about taxation, but I'll toss it out there anyway. So one of the things that BDO has been advocating for is tax reform at a federal and state level. And is this the opportune time now for us to look at whether we should be broadening or increasing the base or rate for GST at a federal level on the basis that it could reduce other taxes at a state level? So really my question for our pollers out there is, would you support an increase to the GST if it led to a meaningful reduction in other state taxes? And when I'm thinking meaningful reduction, I'm thinking elimination in a number of cases. So if our participants could just have a run through that poll. So the GST debate, that would be great. I'll just give you a little bit of a time to go through that. All right, and we have some results rolling in. Okay, well, I can tell you that would be significantly higher than what we've seen previously. So one of the things that I'll chat about here also in terms of changes, we'll chat about tax, but also that work from home, work from office. John, would you like to have a quick chat about either the GST or the changes that we've seen in working environment?
In terms of the GST, I think that is one way that you could get significant reform. Imagine being able to remove payroll tax and indeed land tax for employers. They could just get on employing people, whereas at the moment we have this inbuilt barrier. We can argue about whether our rate's lower than another state, etc., but nonetheless, it is a tax on creating new employment. I contrast that the state does have to raise revenue. It needs revenue, and it's always difficult in terms of the ability of the state to raise revenue. But I think a look at GST would be a good start. Whether the time for that is right, it is a bit of a question, because most people are still consumed at the highest levels of government with keeping their communities safe. What was the second part of the question, David? You got
really
me carried away on GST.
Well, working in the office, working from home. Are you seeing
yes.
change discussion in that regard?
I think, we've been grappling with it in terms of we sent our staff home very early in the piece and went to a virtual working environment. And one of my staff said to me when I announced it to them, and we haven't got a big office, it was 12 people at the time, how's that going to work, John? I said, I have no idea, but we'll make it work. And after a few IT glitches in that first week, we managed to get things put in place. We had to go to an online environment. We were unable to triage phone calls, and we're just working on some systems to deal with that in the future. But our workload doubled. Our staff had to work from home, in a whole new arrangement with all those different pressures that the home environment that can bring, and did an amazing job. I'm just, I cannot speak highly enough of my troops who, in one of the most difficult times, managed to keep our service at the highest levels with volumes that were above that. And at a point in time, we started to bring people back in terms of what do you want to do in coming back into the workplace. And then a couple of weeks ago, we've moved back to having everyone in the office. We're now working through more flexible working arrangements so people can work from home from time to time, but also in the office and provide that customer-facing service that we need. So it's been a journey. I just completed our business continuity plan back in January. Did I have pandemic in there? No. Did I expect this would happen? No. It does force you all to rethink, but nonetheless, I think it shows, and so many businesses have done it themselves, that resilience. And okay, we can't do this, right, we'll do that. We'll need to do this and make it work.
To Kate, so those changes around GST, if you've got some chats, but also about the opportunities within South Australia, given those changes in work environment that we've been going through.
Yeah, certainly love to talk about the flexibility in working from home. Being in people and culture, we're always trying to create flexible work arrangements for our people. And I must say it was a little bit of a challenge in my current employer to move to allowing more flexibility for our office workers particularly. We were very fortunate that we set up our Microsoft Teams prior to COVID. We were connecting with our businesses throughout Australia via Teams and doing VCs, etc. So we were ready, and we moved very promptly, quicker than we anticipated, to a fully remote working from home for about 150 people here from the Adelaide office. And we were pleasantly surprised by the productivity, what we could achieve through the technology, through using, we particularly are fans of Microsoft Teams, and how that worked. But we certainly had challenges with keeping communication flowing, bringing people together. We had a lot of people that would have preferred to have been in the office. So when we made the call to come back on the 20th of July, we were surprised how many people wanted to come back to the office, and it's been smooth sailing since then. We actually have a day a week where we've kept a flexible working arrangement on a Thursday. So we know that if you're not here on a Thursday, you're working from home. However, we see quite a few people coming in and still coming together to meet and collaborate. But I think it's a great move for workplaces, that it's a value proposition for those that need to work more flexibly that they can. And I think the whole culture here has shifted, and certainly across the businesses associated with interstate, we're seeing that as well, that the traditional kind of private equity firms are now working remotely, and of course in Melbourne they need to obviously work remotely at the moment, unfortunately, for an extended period of time, which has its own challenges. But I think a blended approach has been really positive and really great to see.
So Louise, out of your networks, I think if we start first with the changes to work environments and how that was perceived and the opportunities around that going forwards. So if I can ask you that one first, Louise.
Sure. Look, we have very much a blended workforce. So those of us who work in the offices were certainly able to work from home. Some of my staff found that really challenging, and I had to basically say to them, everyone who walks into this office is potentially bringing disease, and we don't want to be the Vinnies cluster, so please go home. It was also, but we do also have a call centre, and unfortunately our call centre, we don't have the technology at the moment to be able to manage that from home. But we also have a lot of face-to-face services. So we have a men's shelter, we have a women's DV shelter. Those services require people to be there and to be face-to-face. They are a high-risk population. We know that they are generally have poorer health. So if we happen to get a case in there, it would have been quite disastrous. So managing those people and providing both the clients and the staff with the level of safety that we could provide in that environment, that high risk, very congregate living environment, was really challenging. I think one of the things I found interesting as a CEO who had only just arrived in the organisation was who of my managers managed by KPIs and who managed by time and presence, and trying to help people understand that, quite frankly, if we can get people to manage by KPIs, that's actually a really good thing. That's what we want. We shouldn't have to monitor people's every minute in order to make sure that we trust them, because if we don't trust them, we shouldn't have employed them in the first place. So that's been quite an interesting experience, learning about how all my managers do manage. Shall I move on to GST?
Oh, we should. We had our poll results there, obviously 80% in favour. It would just be interesting to understand from your networks where you think that position would sit.
So I guess my challenge with the GST is that if we increase the costs of goods and services, then that particularly affects those people who don't have much money, those people who are spending every last cent to survive, those people who turn up to Vinnies to get Vinnies assistance because they can't pay the bill or because they need a food hamper. So those people will be inordinately affected by an increase in GST. What that will mean in the economy, of course, is that there's a drop in demand. And while, yes, lower payroll tax, etc., might lead to more employment, ultimately what leads to more employment is demand, because you have to know that you can make the sale before you put someone on, put the additional cost on. So I would want some economic modelling around that. Certainly the flip side of that, Deloitte Access Economics report, I think that one was initially in 2018 and they've just dated it, where they looked at the benefit of a $75 increase to what was then the New Start allowance, is now Job Seeker. And I think they put it at 3.3 billion to the economy and an extra 12,000 jobs ongoing, because those are the people, when they get extra money, they spend it because they have to survive. So they're spending it on food and, you know, shoes for the kids and getting the car service, things that are local businesses, and give those local businesses the opportunity to make more money.
And I assume that was proven out in the what the federal government did in relation to both the JobKeeper, but also in relation to the additional support for those on benefits, Louise.
Certainly in terms of where the money went, absolutely. In terms of the economy, it's been a bit of a mixed result because of the pandemic happening at the same time. So I can't say that we've actually seen the economy go booming, but what we have seen is that, I mean, certainly in terms of the emergency relief funding that the government provides, the drop in people in crisis coming to us saying, I don't have food tonight, I can't pay my electricity bill, that sort of thing, it has been quite significant and has been across Australia and across the entire sector. So certainly not just our organisation.
So there's been a significant disruption here in terms of the pandemic. We think about in the tourism and hospitality, the feeling was we were probably a bit fortunate that it fell during our winter period when a lot of that activity slows down a little bit in any case. But so what are the opportunities, the changes and the rethinks, Kate, in that sector? So what are people talking about going forwards?
Well, I suppose the opportunities for us is the fact that we've got a captive audience, that people still want to take breaks, and whether they want to take short breaks or longer breaks and see Australia. So that certainly has reset, and a certain demographic that's coming into our business that we perhaps haven't serviced or served before. So the rethink around that is also the kind of products and services that we're offering and the infrastructure that we're putting into our organisation to ensure that we are keeping abreast of what people need, and namely that if more people are on the road camping and caravanning, for example, we're putting in more en-suites where someone can actually put up their van and they've got their own bathroom, etc. Which so that's been an example of doing things differently, and things like our products that we would normally have a smaller amount of high-end product, such as glamping, and those experiences are certainly on the horizon. And so as far as our infrastructure and development, that pillar is certainly something we've been looking at as a result of the shift in the consumer habits and looking to travel in Australia.
Excellent. And John, what rethinks or business changes or new opportunities have you been hearing through your networks?
Well, I think we've seen the creativity of different businesses in terms of how they've actually addressed the issue, and I sort of daren't use the word, but pivoted their business to a degree to survive. And you know, we've talked about our own situations where we had to make it work operating virtually, and one I really love because it's very dear to my heart, and that is pizza. There's a place down on Henley Beach Road, Chico Palms, and they started offering do-it-yourself pizzas with the dough and the add-ons for $30. Now that was a great deal. So they were able to pitch their business into another area. Pranzo, the restaurant in the city, they started selling the products they use in the restaurant, and they were using, let's say, the best of particular food items. They set up a stall on Friday night, so they were doing things differently. Buy local campaigns, we've seen a number of those, and emerging initially with the drought and to a lesser degree with the bushfires. But people started to look local. They wanted local products. So there's a change in consumer sentiment there. There was a gym owner who suddenly decided that he obviously couldn't run his gym, but started to offer his services to the local retirement home in terms of having routines for the elderly and doing that online. So again, it's that creative, well, how can I do it? What can I do in terms of my business? Now, some businesses absolutely recognise, and I keep coming back to the travel agents, where not only did they lose business, but they had to keep their staff employed to do all the refunds for people who'd booked holidays. So it wasn't that easy for some businesses, but I think it's given everyone an opportunity to take a step back and think, well, what am I doing? How do I do it differently? How do I insulate myself better for the future? And, you know, I like to think that that's going to be an ongoing part of what we do, rather than, oh, we got through that, back to business as usual and until the next thing comes along.
So Louise, we spoke about that there has been some learnings through this period. So for you, what do you think we should have learned through that period, and what are those opportunities while we continue to go through this disruption?
Oh, look, I think the obvious one is the integration of technology across our businesses. And as a dispersed business as we've got 61 plus sites across the state. That's been fantastic, and has jump-started our move into that area. I'd very much support John's comment around local. I think we're a very connected community that has, in many ways, both saved us, but also I think that with the lockdown and the restrictions, we've become more aware of how connected we are to our locals. So I think that has been a really big step. We are supporting our locals. you know, at the other end of the scale, I was also out supporting local restaurants as well in their takeaway period, just because we wanted them to be there at the other end. So I think that understanding that we all live and die as a community and we need to support each other is a really good opportunity for us to build on, both as a state and as our local community. I've loved seeing all the different parts of the state, as my friends who would normally be overseas are now in Inaminka and, you know, Coober Pedy and all sorts of places until I got rained out. So, you know, that's, I think, possibly something that might actually build on from here. You know, we may, the holiday at home thing might grow, and that'd be great. Supporting our locals in the regions as well.
Absolutely. So I have a question here from one of our participants. So some employers, national ones, even government ones, are resisting a return to the office, despite South Australia being declared to do so. And obviously we spoke earlier about the CBD still being a bit quieter. The economic implications for that, and should we be lobbying businesses to get back into the CBD, or is this a change? Who'd like to jump at this one?
My response is yes, we should be lobbying. I think there are reasons, and probably some research to come, as to why employees like to come to work and like to be part of a team. I think it's important for economic development, and it doesn't mean that it has to be every day that people come in to work to the office. There can be a blend. So I think there's some validity in that, and certainly in South Australia we feel very safe to come to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think you know, that is one of the big problems with CBDs around Australia, is that the lack of people from both the corporate and indeed the government sector. And certainly our state, the Premier's made it clear he wants people back to work. It's necessary, because if you haven't got a vibrant heart of the city, then you really haven't got much, would be my description, and let alone all those little businesses that survive in the retail area and indeed the food area. So I think we should be encouraging to get everyone back as soon as possible, but also then balancing that work-life balance and the work from home. It's finding that happy medium, and I think that's where the discussion now needs to move, as to how we achieve that. But it will also potentially have big implications for commercial office space. I can't imagine a new office building being built in the CBD for some time unless you've got the anchor tenant signed up, because people are re-looking at it and corporates are re-looking at it. So there are some dynamics in that space that are still to play out.
And another question here around. Yeah, go Louise, go.
Look, I was going to say, look, I certainly support that, and Vinnie's has an op shop in the city, which is not quite open yet, but will be soon. And that had a significant downturn when people went home. However, I do wonder if this is our new normal. If this is, you know, clearly I'm working from home this afternoon. I actually was in the office this morning, but you know, I think it's become a lot more normal to work from home. And you know, recognising that there are, as well as the economic implications of that, there are business implications. So obviously a face-to-face meeting is a different dynamic to on Zoom, and there are some corporate things that actually have to happen face-to-face. It's important to be seen by staff, etc. And if you're working with clients, then obviously some clients would prefer a face-to-face, and it is a different experience. But I do think that we've had a significant reset, and there may be a different level of normal than what we have had. It may not return to what was previously normal.
Thank you, Louise. And another question related to this sits around retail. So obviously significant disruption in relation to bricks and mortar retail. We would have thought we would see significant move to online. So has this changed anybody's views around at what sorts of percentage we think online might top out versus that bricks and mortars interaction for retail? So again, any views out of the networks?
I can only speak from
my own that one.
digital sales have increased enormously. So we are seeing that people are obviously searching for an experience more so than the way that they've probably interacted or booked with an organisation such as ours through travel agents or through other booking mechanisms or phoning or just arriving. So we're seeing the digital reliance on digital sales is quite phenomenal. Just it's really it has really peaked during COVID. Whether that's just Victoria also.
So my observation would be it is industry specific. So we run a network of 32 retail shops, op shops across South Australia. Obviously an op shop is what you expect, but we also do school uniforms as well. We have looked at the online experience, and for op shopping, it's not ideal. So for the high-end goods, for your design and recycle, it might work there. Certainly for uniforms, it can work because it's the same product, you know more or less what you're getting and the size. But in terms of one-off items, particularly those really cheap items, it's not financially viable. If you're paying $2 for a t-shirt, you don't want to pay $3 for mailing. And I can't guarantee that you're going to get whatever you want in the right size. We also know that for our industry, a fair amount of our business, our shoppers, are people who like to op shop, and that's their recreation. They actually want to come into the shop and they want to scurry through and sort of look at what's there and try things on and find a treasure. And you can do that online, but it's not quite the same experience. So we did look at online, but I'm not sure it's going to be a massive thing for us.
Excellent. So again, John, what are your hopes for the next 6 months in terms of the South Australian economy and the small medium business economy?
Look, I'll just go back. I think, Louise, you're right about op shops. I did hear Peter Gers the other night on the ABC and what he'd done on the weekend, and I think he'd visited 7 op shops on the Saturday. So it is that very personal experience. But in terms of next 6 months, I'd like to be super confident, but it's going to be driven by border openings and potentially closures. We're still no closer to seeing international open up. No, that was kicked out. I think Alan Joyce kicked that out to July next year, quite early in the piece. Until there's, vaccine or a better way of treatment, some quick testing, I think that's going to shape the economy, particularly in Australia. So I think it's about as much resilience, being ready to change, to move, to adapt in a very, what I would regard still uncertain environment in terms of the pandemic. South Australia's done a great job, but as we open up the borders, that may lead to changes. We're seeing things happen overseas. There's still an international uncertainty there. So it is pretty hard to look too far forward, but you should always plan for the future. And if you have to deviate, well, so be it. A business plan, as I've always said, every business should have one, even if it's a one-pager. It is a plan. Things happen, things change along the way, but if you're not aiming to get somewhere, you'll never get there.
Kate, if we think out a little bit further than that for tourism and hospitality, so let's say we talk about 2 years. So what are the things that you'd be hoping for in the next 6 months to realise those opportunities through the next 2 years?
Well, I think as Louise was saying, hopefully people will experience more of the Australian tourism product and will choose Australian perhaps over some of the overseas regular trips that they would have done. And perhaps have learned that, there's reasons why from a health and wellbeing perspective that it's best to travel within Australia. So we're relatively confident that the next 2 years, if we don't get a second wave and if we can manage the virus, that the tourism industry will rebound. Obviously, there's some sectors that rely on international that will struggle. So I'm only speaking from our perspective where We don't have that reliance. We've always been a product for Australians to travel within Australia. But what we're seeing is investment in new greenfield sites and reinvigorating some Australian products and sites that have been neglected for the last 10 or so years. So we're a business that wants to improve product and experiences and infrastructure. So we've got a significant amount of money that our owner has committed to spending, which is hugely exciting. So we're looking at a lot of due diligence, and we're in acquisition phase. So for us, it's really positive, and hopefully we can hold. We've learned a lot about the levers we can pull if and when we get a hot spot, such as Victoria. We have a great mix of business. So we can only think that hopefully things will continue to go well for us.
And Louise, if we think out further again, so we think about the next 5 or 10 years with the disruption we've been through, what opportunities do you see we could be grasping now for structural change that would lead to those 5 or 10 year plans?
Look, I think I'd start with December this year or January this year. If we don't drop JobSeeker, then that keeps some jobs, it keeps demand in the economy. If we increase it back to the COVID supplements, then we know that, you know, economically that is has been modelled to increase demand and increase jobs in our local economy. The other thing that I saw a lot of economists calling for, which, you know, probably fed to what my initial biases were anyway, was social housing. Now we know that you know, particularly women over 55 are the highest rate or highest increase of demographic of people experiencing homelessness. You know, we just need to do something about that, and that can actually build jobs and build the economy as well. I mean, fundamentally, we all want the same thing, which is we want the pandemic to be well managed, which it has been in Australia. We want to be able to build our economy. We want people to be able to get back to work and to live secure, happy lives, and to be a solid community. So, you know, that's really, those two things are so intertwined and I think those countries where they have separated the course of the pandemic from economics have paid the price, because they are ultimately extremely intertwined.
Excellent. Look, we're getting close to winding up there. So, John, some final comments?
Yeah, I think like everything, if you look back at history, there's been difficulties along the way. We've had, you know, we had the tech boom, we had that collapse, you had the GFC, we've got the COVID pandemic, and, you know, we had SARS. There's been different things along the way. We've adapted, and again, it comes back to my point, it's about being resilient, ready to change the business model for small business owners. Keep looking to the future. What are the threats? It's the old story, you would well know, David, of the SWOT analysis. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats to our business? That, again, you don't have to go through complex exercises if you're a small business owner, but keep looking at it. Keep looking at, you know, who's having a crack at your business. This is COVID-19 has been the mother of all disruptions. We're talking about disruption of your Ubers and your Airbnbs changing the way we do business, but the pandemic, the way it's come upon businesses, and businesses have had to adapt. I think there are lessons there that if we all take them on board will serve us very well for the future.
Thank you, John. Louise, some final reflections?
Yeah, look, I really like John's reflection about this being the mother of all disruptors. And I think, interestingly, it's really reset the way that we're disrupting. So if you look at a number of disruptions that we've been experiencing in the Ubers and etc. in the recent past, it's been very much around that gig economy. And this has actually really put paid to that. I mean, that has been the people who are employed in the gig economy and people who have had to work multiple jobs. And I'm thinking, you know, carers in aged care where they're working in multiple places. we're actually now looking and seeing that that has costs, and it doesn't just cost the individual, it costs the community. So I do think this is an opportunity to rethink how we do business and how we work as a community to ensure that we're all safe and we all have the opportunities that we can take. And it is an opportunity. And when I look around, you know, I mean, I guess Kate's industry, without wanting to talk about Kate's industry necessarily, the winners and losers are across the sector. And, you know, in that industry, it's been very much around, you know, some of the regional areas are now becoming winners, and some of the, you know, the travel agents that John talks about are still really suffering. So it has brought a lot of opportunity across the sector, but it's been very unevenly spread. And I think this is the opportunity to rethink how we do business and how it works for us as a community.
Excellent, thank you, Louise. And to Kate, your final reflections?
Yeah, I certainly agree, obviously, with what has been said to date. But I think we've all learned about the importance of continuing to invest in technology, to continue to stay relevant. I think, you know, the reflections of how the government have responded when it has come to helping businesses manage through crises. I also think about, you know, how culturally, how organisations have had to navigate crises, and a crisis that hasn't been just short-lived, that we're still living through, and living through uncertainty and what that means from your strategic planning and how decisions that you make and how you're geared to focus on in the event that another wave of a crisis occurs. So we've, you know, from my perspective, we've had crises that are short term and we can reset. But I suppose on reflection, and my biggest focus is fatigue and what that means from running businesses during a pandemic, is that we've also had the fatigue of a downturn, but now fatigue of an upturn. So these are new challenges that are facing organisations.
Excellent. So on behalf of the participants, I'd like to thank the three of you for joining us. It's been wonderful to have your insights, so to John and Kate and Louise. But this is not the end for our participants. So as BDO, we continue to try to keep the conversation going around business in South Australia. We currently have our state business survey, which you can participate in. So if you have 10 to 15 minutes over the next day or two, I would encourage you to engage in our state business survey to express your views and to continue to support us to have this conversation for business around the South Australian economy. The results are presented to government and to opposition and published in the media to help promote that discussion. So it is your opportunity to present a wholly South Australian perspective of what you're currently facing and your hopes and the opportunities for the future. So keep an eye out for an email in respect also of the recording of today to refer to others, and a link through to the survey. So again, my thanks to all of the participants and to everybody that's tuned in. Please enjoy the rest of today. Thank you.